welcome everybody. It's good to see a lot of familiar faces out here this afternoon and a lot of new faces as well. Happy Wednesday afternoon and welcome to PNRI's second Science and Wine Club. I am Cindy Haba and I am one of the board trustees for PNRI as well as the chair of our development committee. And this is the second in a series of events that PNRI has scheduled to welcome our community, to get to hear a little bit from our scientists and our favorite wine partners as well. So we know that science has become a primary topic of discussion, probably with everybody in the world these days, right? And so we're really pleased to be able to step into that lane and to share some very interesting and pertinent topics with all of you this evening. And we'd like you to be part of that conversation that we're going to have here tonight. PNRI has a long history of pairing science and wine together, and so Science and Wine Club is a natural for us. We pick a theme every event for our Science and Wine Club, and our theme tonight is responding or adapting to stress. And we think that's probably relative to a lot of people as well right now, right? And so how do we come up with that theme? Well, Lisa Stubbs, our fabulous researcher, studies genetics and stress. And Chuck Reininger from Reininger Winery, he knows all about plants and the stress that happens to plants and what happens to the vines and then what happens to the wine. So that just seemed like a perfect pairing to understand a little bit more how stress impacts, all of us, plants and humans, right? And so that's going to be our focus for this evening, and that's going to be how you're going to be hearing our two speakers for tonight. So I'd like to introduce Lisa. Lisa Stubbs is one of our newer scientists at PNRI, and I'm just thrilled that she is part of the Institute. And I have had the privilege as a board member to hear her speak a couple of times now, and I have just been beyond fascinated with what she's researching and what she's studying. And Lisa brings a wealth of knowledge and experience around studying stress. And we all know that stress causes mental issues with health issues, anxiety, depression. It also causes physical health issues as well. But we probably all don't know enough about how stress is actually in response to what our genes are doing. And so Lisa is going to share with us a little bit about that gene stress connection and how that manifests in our bodies. So Lisa, without much further ado, please take it away.
So now I'm going to share my screen and start the presentation. So first, hello everybody. Nice to meet you. I see that there are a few people in the room who are from our board, so you may have seen some of what I'm going to present today, but hopefully it's not too boring for you. So I think I am going to cover a little bit of new materials, so hopefully you'll find something interesting in there. All right, so I just tried to share my screen and it didn't work. There we go. Can everybody see it?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So the title is Stress and Your Health. And the message I'm going to get through to you, it is really all in your head and in your genes. And so it's not just in your head, it's in your brain in particular. And this picture is a very close-up image of a thin section of a mouse brain, a part of the brain that's involved in how you handle stress. And so what I want to talk about is how chronic stress drives mental and physical ailments. I think everybody knows that when you're stressed, you don't sleep well, you don't eat necessarily well, you don't feel well, you start to have ailments of all kinds. And that's even for short-term stress. But long-term stress or chronic stress drives a series of really serious health problems. That includes mental health issues like anxiety disorders and panic attacks, depression, substance abuse. I should have put sleep disorders in there too, because that's something that's definitely caused by chronic stress. And on the other side, it affects your body. In particular, chronic stress leads to obesity, insulin resistance and glucose intolerance, type 2 diabetes in particular, cardiovascular disease, and a lot of inflammatory illnesses. And the way I have this image drawn is to kind of convey that those things feed back on each other. So once you start having anxiety disorders, panic attacks, depression, substance abuse, it's more likely that you will receive some of those health issues on the physical side, and vice versa. Once you start having problems with your insulin control, and you start having disorders and feeling bad, of course, and suffering from illnesses, it also feeds back to your brain and exacerbates the brain disorders as well. And so this is a vicious cycle that once it gets set up is very, very hard for people to break. So let me see if I can make this work. Excuse me, I'm having a little technical issue here. I'm trying to make my slide advance, and I can't seem to do it. Let's see. Let's try it this way. Yes, okay. So what kinds of stressors are driving this kind of cycle, this vicious cycle? Well, there are lots of different kinds of things that can cause chronic stress. But social and socioeconomic stressors are really, really effective drivers. So economic insecurity, job loss, for example, worries about health and healthcare, which is something that affects a lot of people, especially these days. Family burdens, if you have an ill or incapacitated family member who needs a lot of care, that puts a lot of stress on people. Strife at home or work, people who live in a really uncomfortable environment. And there are a lot of people in that situation. Either they're overtly under stress from their family members, or there's a lot of subtle things going on that make them uncomfortable. Isolation is just as bad. So you may be living with people who you feel a little uncomfortable with is terrible, but isolation is terrible. And that's another issue that, of course, is really important right now with people having been hunkering down because of the virus and not being able to have their normal social contacts. Things like bullying and harassment, hostile or threatening environments. And really, honestly, there's a lot of good research on this, just feelings of inadequacy or low status, even if that's a subjective thought, stresses people out. And it's all very relative, of course. But people who feel chronically low status or inadequate really suffer from stress response. So all of those things feed back into this vicious cycle of health and mental health, physical health and mental health. And they really set up a cycle that it's difficult to break. Now, one of the things we have talked about before is there's ways that some of these things can get short-circuited. So people who are really prone to anxiety and depression, even though they don't live under what you and I would consider to be a stressful circumstance, can still develop all of these symptoms. And likewise, people with problems controlling their insulin levels or their glucose tolerance, if it's not treated, for example, can get into these cycles as well, even if stress was not the initial cause. And so all of these things are really intimately connected, and that makes it really, really very difficult to break. So many of the symptoms are somatic or in your body, but in fact, the real driver is in the brain. And the problem is integrating the stress, flight or fight mechanisms with insulin activity. That's a very central mechanism here. And that's why these things feed back on each other. So this is an area of the brain. I hope you can see my cursor. This central thing that's lit up in yellow here is a little part of the brain called the hypothalamus. It looks very small and innocent, but it's sitting right there at the edge of the brain and the cerebral spinal fluid and very close to the pituitary. And this little teeny region is just jam-packed with neurons that secrete hormones, little peptide hormones that can influence your mood, your sleep, your eating, your tendency to eat, and your whole body metabolism. And that's partly because this little region has access out through the cerebral spinal fluid and through some blood vessels that are here close to the hypothalamus, as well as to all these other regions of the brain. So it's reaching out and reaching in. It's reaching into the brain and communicating stress signals into the brain, but also communicating them to the body. And so this is our little control center. I think people like to think that we're controlled by this part of our brain, the cortex, our thinking brain, and we're not. We're controlled by this part, which is your sort of reptilian brain. I'm sorry, I was able to advance it without meaning to. Your reptilian brain, or the part of your brain that controls your emotions and your responses to stress. So how does this all work? Well, it turns out that stress inputs are received through your sensory systems and passed on to these emotional regions of the brain. And the hypothalamus is the main kind of central controller of all of this, communicating stress to your brain and body. And it controls a wide array of physical processes. But the truth is that both the perception of stress, what stresses you out, and what level of slight or problem leads you into this cycle, and your response to it, what it does to your body in the end, are controlled by your genes, together with your environment, how you were brought up, things that happened in your childhood, situations in your life. And all of those things feed back to your genes. So both the perception of stress and your reaction to it are controlled by genetics. So the big questions are, what are the genetic mechanisms that define individual susceptibility or resilience to stress? So there are people who can be stressed out in ways that would absolutely tear me apart, most people apart, and are perfectly fine with it, are perfectly able to adapt and handle it. And there are individuals, as I was suggesting before, that are hypersensitive to small slights, to small problems, to perceptions of themselves that aren't probably necessarily objectively real. And so the question is, what are the genetic differences between those hyper resistant or resilient individuals and those that are hyper susceptible? And there are a lot of shades in between. Most of us are in the middle there. And we all have our individual, the things that stress us out, things that make us feel okay. And we all also have different responses, kind of depending on our environment, our health, our current situation, our past, and so forth. And so this gene by environment interaction is very interesting and very important and complex. It's involving body, brain, and the part of the brain that receives the signals, as well as the part of the brain that manages the signals and sends it out to the body. So what we think is that the knowledge of the mechanisms that control these reactions, the really dominant, important genetic factors that make a difference in terms of individuals, knowing about some of those dominant factors and how they interact with other genes, could lead us to design personalized interventions. So not everybody's going to respond to stress the same way, and not everybody's going to respond to interventions the same way. These need to be kind of personally designed depending on your body, your brain, and so forth. And so that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're interested in doing. Let me see if I can make this work. All right. Okay. Our current focus, my group works with mice. And we work with mice partly because, well, just because I've done it all my life and I'm pretty good at it, but also they're just amazing models for genetics. And what they let you do is go from the observation of a genetic connection and drill down and figure out the actual physical mechanism, the biochemical mechanism, the genetic mechanisms, so that you can really understand how things work together. And so that's what my group does. We're interested in how we can use mouse genetics to understand behavioral disorders such as anxiety and phobias and depression, and how the brain adapts to stress. So why is it that certain individuals can adapt and other individuals cannot? And a lot of that has to do with genetics, and there are some great mouse genetic models that look very much like what we know about the human situation in this case. And we really want to understand the link between the brain stress centers and metabolic disease and how those things are connected. and what genes are important for those processes. We're also, since I've been to Seattle, which is just since July, I'm working with David Gallus's group to collaborate, to develop collaborations with physicians to identify groups of people, that patient groups that are coming into clinics with stress-related disorders and diabetes in particular, to identify new genetic causes of human stress-related disorders. And David is a mathematician who works with human genetics and is developing methods to try to tease out some of those gene interactions. So we're interested in stress susceptibility as it occurs in type 1 diabetes. It's a well-known fact that type 1 diabetes patients are a little bit more susceptible to stress as a group than people without it. And there's lots of complicated reasons behind that, but some of it is genetics. We're interested in stress as a driver of type 2 diabetes and obesity. And we're interested in stress in a particular case, which is gestational diabetes, which is something I'm becoming really excited about. We're trying to develop a collaboration with a group that in a clinic that's a prenatal clinic. And what we're interested in is how gestational diabetes, or diabetes during pregnancy, is linked to postnatal anxiety and depression in mothers, but it also sets the stage for those mothers to develop diabetes and obesity and metabolic disorders later in their life, as well as cardiovascular disease. And it predisposes the children. So the children that are exposed to this diabetes in utero are badly affected. They have learning disabilities, they have mental health issues, they have physical health issues. We're really interested in understanding how the baby's genetics and the mother's genetics interact to buffer or exacerbate those problems. All right, so now I'm just going to show you our team here. This is us at Chris's house, who's here on the right of this picture. And Chris is a major player in this project that I just described to you. The group includes Pixel, who is our math whiz right here. That's Chris's dog. And just because we showed Pixel here, I'm going to have to show you my main current driver of stress, who is sitting at my feet right now, biting on my toes. And she's an inducer of stress and great joy, which is what her name means. That's the end of my presentation. I'm looking forward to hearing some of your questions.
All right, I guess that throws it over to me now. So I'm Chuck Reininger. I'm winemaker and owner of Reininger Winery. We started Reininger in 1997 here in Walla Walla. Started it with my wife. And we have 3 different labels of wine that we produce here. First one is Reininger, which is all Walla Walla Valley fruit. The second one is Helix, which is Columbia Valley fruit. And we have a third label called CPR. May be appropriate for this discussion, but CPR actually are my initials, and Charles Philip Reininger. And the wine is heart thumping good, but that's our special projects wine. And we do lots of fun, go places where we don't go with the 2 AVA related wines. AVA stands for American Viticultural Area. It's basically equivalent to what a French appellation is. So, but wine is really, a lot of people say a combination of art and science. And it's been around for thousands of years and has kept man healthy and in place for a long time, and we learn to make it through observation. I come to it more from the artisanship side of it, and I use the science end of it to confirm what I'm observing anyway, and in the wine. And so the trick is to good winemaking is being able to observe and identify bad things that are happening in wine and being able to jump on them and take care of them right away, and to prevent them from getting out of hand, and that's where a lot of the science end of it comes in. So I started as a home winemaker in 1993, and in 1997 we turned it into a professional winery. So stress, yeah, stress is important in growing of the fruit. How do we use stress in the vine? Stress can be a very good thing with growing vines, and it can also be a very bad thing. So a trick to growing excellent fruit is actually balance. We're trying to achieve balance in the fruit and really concentration of flavors. So when we talk about vine stress, there's many different factors. One is nutrition. Lack of nutrition can stress vines. Water is, or lack of water, I should say, stresses vines. Weather. So whether it's heat, rain, cold, wind, hail, disease is another stressor for vines. So as far as disease goes, there's viruses, there's microbes that can attack the vines. There's fungi that can attack the vines. And then there's also insects and pests. And another thing that can stress it too is vigor, and overcropping of it can stress vines and actually weaken the vines over time, and shorten the longevity of the life of a vine itself. But I think the types of stress that we're more interested in for this discussion are more stress is relating to how we can improve the quality of the fruit to make great wine. So as a winemaker, to make great wine, we need great fruit, and that is key. So the quality of our ingredients, how could I use that word? But anyway, the quality of our fruit is really determines the outcome of the wines that we make. And I can't make great wine from poor fruit, poor quality fruit. I can make decent wine, but in order to make great wine, we need high quality, great fruit. But it's also very easy to make really bad wine from high quality fruit as well. So what are we trying to achieve when we stress? I mean, a lot of people think it's really been an ongoing debate, really, since the start of winemaking and growing vines, as far as stress. Does it make it better, or is it really just a figment of our imaginations? Is it real? And if it is real, where when in the life cycle, the growing cycle of the vintage, do we apply stress factors? So the main thing that we're really trying to achieve when we're talking about quality, we're trying to get intense flavor and aroma and color. And the way in which we do that is trying to increase the skin to juice ratio, if you will. So most of the flavors and aromas in the wine, and the colors and the tannins, come from the skins themselves. And so that's where most of the phenolics, which are the compounds that make up all those things I just talked about, come from. So the more skin that we can have to the juice, the more concentrated wine we can have, the more extraction of those components that we can get out of those skins if we have more skin. So how do we get there? How do we develop that skin? So smaller berries. So when you have a smaller berry, you're going to have a larger skin to juice ratio. Okay, so that's one of the goals of it, is to grow clusters, or grapes, berries that have small berries, but then also oftentimes smaller cluster size too can be beneficial. So how do we do that? First of all, it really starts the season before. Certain times of the year, the bud formation actually begins, say for the 2021 growing season. We're going to start seeing bud formation develop inside the plant anyway, that for the 22 vintage here. So at certain times there's things that we want to do to make sure that the beginning of those nascent buds, we take care of that. But at the end of the growing season, we want to make sure that the vines get put to bed properly. So so after harvest, we actually will make sure that soils have plenty of water. So if the vines have been stressed too much, we do need photosynthesis to develop the sugars, and sugars are important for the vine during the dormant season. The sugars actually will be stored in the roots and the wood. When it's stored in the roots, that's energy for the plant in the spring when it begins to grow. And sugar in the wood actually during the winter actually helps act as an antifreeze too. So we end up watering the soils around the vines quite a bit. This actually helps set up protection, winter protection for the soils by having moisture in the soils. Helps protect the roots more during the winter. So, but and then during the winter, we hopefully have plenty of rainfall that will recharge the soils. And then in the springtime, when the soils start warming up and the buds start to swell, when the roots start warming up, the energy starts to flow, and the sap starts to flow inside the vine, and will start to swell the buds. And so this critical time for the vines. We have to make sure that there's plenty of moisture to get the vine going in the spring. So from right now, what's happening now in the vineyards is we're just starting to see bud break now. So we see the little fuzzy buds that are actually starting to open up, and some of the leaves are budding out right now. Then after that, we'll go to what we call the flowering or bloom. And during this time, the plant needs to have actually sufficient water. We don't want to be stressing the plant at all during this time period, because we want the vines to develop the buds, the shoots. The shoots will lead to the canopy and the fruit and the growth. So we want that flowering to be healthy. But then once we get the canopy growth, so the canopy growth is the shoot and the leaves. So we want enough energy in the plant for those shoots to grow and to develop leaves, because the leaves is our power system. That's where the photosynthesis is going to take place. And then once the vines flower or bloom, there actually are tiny, tiny little flowers on the vines themselves. And you'll see what creates the bunches anyway. And those flowers will become berries. And so the vines are actually self-pollinating. But once we have that berry development, then we have what's called fruit set. So we have the flowering and the pollination takes place. And then we have what's known as fruit set. That's where the flowers actually turn into little tiny berries. And at this point, this is a point where we want to start stressing that fruit, or the vines anyway, because this is when it determines cell division. And remember, one of the goals is to have small berries. And so if we can stress the vine to a degree, not so much that we're starving it of nutrition and too much water, but we do want to stress it stress it a little bit so we can slow down that cell division and inhibit some of that cell division, so to help us get smaller berries. Another thing that is important too during fruit set is the weather. So heat and wind and rain can have an effect on it. So if there's a lot of rain happening, so this would be natural stress, it can affect the pollination process anyway. And so we can, if there's a lot of wind and rain happening, we can get what's called colure. And that's where the, anyway, the flowers won't turn into berries, or some of the flowers won't. And this is not necessarily a bad thing, because what it will do, it will help determine what the architecture of the cluster is, or i.e. the grape bunch. And so it's actually nice to have a open architecture. If the berries are packed tight together, we don't get a lot of airflow through the cluster. Why is that important? Well, airflow helps to inhibit, it helps, well, it helps dry out the clusters after a rain, and therefore it helps inhibit mold and microbial growth within the cluster. So if that can't, if the berries can't dry out, if they're packed so tightly together that they can't dry out, we can get molds growing in between there, and fungi, and you know, other spoilage things going on in there. So loose architecture actually is a good thing. So that's where Mother Nature's stress can help out a lot. But right about mid-June or so, we want the vines to stop sending their energy to the canopy, okay? If vines have a will, they just want to keep growing. They want to grow and grow and grow. So if they have a continual source of water, they will continue to grow that canopy. So their energy will go to the canopy, get a lot of leaf structure, a lot of shoots. And what's sad about that is it's not putting the energy towards developing the berries and the fruit itself. So big canopy, lots of vigor can actually lead to green type flavors, and that's not what we're looking for. So when we start putting some more stress by holding back some water, we can slow that shoot growth down, and it signals the plants, hey, let's stop. I have enough canopy here. I have enough little solar panels that this is great. Now we can start concentrating on the fruit. Canopy is really important. If we give it too much water, we have lots of basal leaves. Those are leaves down at the base of the shoot itself. They develop pyrazine, so that's more of kind of a green bell pepper type flavor that can develop in wine, particularly say in Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc. So if we can limit some of that growth too, of those basal leaves, in fact, we'll even go through the vineyard and strip some of those leaves out early in the season, because those pyrazines will migrate from the leaves up the shoots and into the stems of the clusters, and then eventually into the fruit. So if we can limit pyrazine production, we'll get more fruit-centered wine. So after the berries are developed, and after fruit set, and we've stressed the berries, and after cell division, then we can have moderate amount of stress, and we don't want to stress this plant so much that it's shutting down and that photosynthesis ceases. But as long as we have the canopy growth under control, that's great. One of the things during the warmer months of say mid-June through August and into September, if the temperature gets too hot, an interesting phenomenon happens, and that is that the stomata, which are pores on the bottom side of the leaves, will actually close, in an effort to conserve water. So if the plants don't have enough water or it gets too hot, those stomata will close, and so the plant respiration will cease. It will stop. And so therefore it's not taking in carbon dioxide. We need carbon dioxide to form those carbohydrates in the plant. And also respiration does not take place. Oxygen does not get exchanged out into the atmosphere when that happens. But and so photosynthesis stops, it ceases. So it's really important that the plant can also do this. If the plant is healthy anyway, and there's enough moisture in there, the plant will shut down when the temperature gets about 90-95 degrees. But if the plant is extremely stressed as far as has water stress anyway, it can shut down at a lot lower temperature because the plant, if there's not enough water in the soil, the plant can actually start taking up micro air bubbles, if you will, and that would stop the flow of sap and nutrients up into the plant. So there's a mechanism that the plants will close the stomata to prevent that from happening. And so, but if we stop that photosynthesis, well, that stops sugar production. And so we don't necessarily want that either. So because sugar production is what we need to make good wine. We need good sugar in the fruit there. So if we stress it too much, photosynthesis ceases at lower temperatures and will not begin until the plant doesn't feel that stress anymore. And then the stomata will open up and photosynthesis will begin again. So that condition though happens when it gets too hot, about 95 degrees or so, and also if it gets too windy, it will also cease the photosynthesis. So if that all happens, that delays the ripening process too. So it can delay harvest if that happens too much. So we're always looking for this fine balance anyway of doing it. So the idea is to grow smaller clusters, smaller berries, get that taken care of, but then the plant, and then also to moderate the canopy growth. If you have too much canopy, not enough sunlight also gets to the fruit. Sunlight helps create some of these wonderful phenolics that I talked about earlier. And
Hey, Chuck.
yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say that I want to save some room for our question and answer too. And I'm just,
all right,
as you're talking, that I just planted my vegetable garden this weekend, and I'm just thinking, water it and some sunshine, and it's all good. But it's fascinating how much, that winemakers are scientists as well as, biological genetic scientists are. There's a lot that goes into all of that, and it's actually a lot more complex than we probably realize for those who just enjoy the glass of wine, right?
It is.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're trying to do, but that's the whole thing. We're trying to, through stressing it is, we're trying to, the main thing is create those great phenolics and color and aromas in the fruit by stressing it to some degree, but also small berry size, and that's what was going to give us the high quality fruit. And with high quality fruit, we get high quality wine.
We do. Yes.
Yes. And there's a little bit of Merlot here. This is our 2017 Helix Merlot. And I'll pour a little bit more in the glass here.
Well, while Chuck's pouring glasses, and everybody fill up your wine glass, and let's see if we can turn to some question and answer so that we get a chance to actually talk directly with our experts here in the room. And I have a first question here. I'm going to pop back to Lisa to bring us back to Lisa's presentation as well. And Lisa, one thing that came up, and for me, and I think I saw someone here as well, that the connection between insulin and the part of the brain that controls the stress response. You talked about type 1 diabetes, you talked about type 2 diabetes, you talked about gestational diabetes, which are all three really separate things, but the stress response impacts all of them. Maybe you could share a little bit more with us about that phenomenon, that aspect.
So there are neurons, nerve cells in the hypothalamus that are kind of clustered into little groups that are responsible for controlling different kinds of responses to stress, to metabolic disorder, to too high glucose or insulin in your body, and so forth. And they have insulin receptors on them. And so the insulin in your bloodstream is received by these cells, and it gets into these cells through various mechanisms largely because of the connection between that region of the brain and your bloodstream, which is not true for all parts of the brain. A lot of parts of the brain are kind of sealed off from signaling in your bloodstream. But small proteins like insulin can get across, and they are particularly received by neurons that are in this region that I described, the hypothalamus, and in different portions, and they will react with neurons in these different little clusters to produce reactions on different parts of the body. So insulin definitely signals to those nerve cells, which then reach out to other parts of the brain and other parts of the body to control lots of different functions. And there are insulin receptors actually in other parts of the brain as well that get where this insulin gets communicated to these other neurons. So it's kind of a not super new, but not super old finding that insulin actually interacts with nerve cells in the brain, that it gets through the blood-brain barrier, and that it actually signals to those neurons and has a big role in brain development and brain response.
Wow, so interesting. Becky, do you want to feed me the next question that we had put in chat?
This may be a question I think that maybe Lisa has already answered, but this question is from Amy. What causes the hypothalamus to send signals to the HPA axis versus insulin? Are some people more prone to one side or the other,
Yes.
or to one response than the other?
Yes. So the job of the hypothalamus, at least part of the hypothalamus, is to control the HPA axis. It does that in everybody. It does it dependent on the stressor, and it has different downstream impacts, but always the hypothalamus is involved in controlling the HPA axis. And the HPA axis is called hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. It's your flight or fight system. It's like, oh boy, I just saw something scary. My heart is pounding. My temperature is going up. All of that is controlled by your hypothalamus. And that is in everybody. All people have that. It's independent of your genetics. That's what the function of that part of the brain does. But what sets it off and how badly it sets it off and what it does downstream are dependent on your genetics. And yeah.
Great, thank you. Becky, what's up next?
So Andrews, I don't think it was a question, but it's an interesting sidebar, which is that stress also significantly impairs milk production in cows.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And in humans.
Yeah.
It is because that part of your brain is also controlling the pituitary, which is involved in milk production. And a lot of, one of the reasons why we're so interested in this gestational diabetes thing is because of the role of the hypothalamus in maternal biology. And part of it is definitely having to do with milk production. So it's not just cows, but it's definitely cows.
Lisa, I know you've talked about this before, but as people pursue healthier lifestyles to help offset some of the stress things, do you see them having the ability to counteract the genetic part of their makeup?
Yes, you can ameliorate some of your, so there are several things you can do. If you, let's say you're born to be really frightened of a particular thing, or as a child you develop a certain kind of phobia, and it really, I've heard people talk about this before, they have children who are frightened of things and they can't understand where it came from. It didn't come from their background as far as they can tell. I mean, they were very sheltered children and so forth, but they still react to things in a very sensitive way that other people don't react to. You can teach people. People can be trained to understand that that's okay. So your environment and your genes play together there. You have a susceptibility to be frightened of something or to have something really stress you out. But your environment, your mentors, the people around you, the situations in your life can ameliorate those stresses, the impact of those stresses. That's why it's really important to understand that this is genes by environment. It's not just genes and that's the end of the story.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's good to know. What's our next question?
Oh, so many of the questions are for Lisa, which is great, and we'll go back to them. But I wanted to I know that Chuck, you didn't get a chance really to talk about your wines, and I think the sun was in your eyes, and you didn't see how fast time was moving. But did you want to just say something quick about your wines?
Well, yeah, they're awesome.
Well, I know we had 2 wines. I didn't know if you wanted to.
Yeah, we have the 2017 Helix Merlot. And that wine, it's actually 97% Merlot and 3% Cabernet Sauvignon, and it comes from mostly Sagemore Bacchus Vineyard, which is just north of Pasco, and the Cabernet Sauvignon comes from a small vineyard called Finney Hill, which is down near Alderdale. So there's about 24% new oak on there, and it's all American oak that's on that wine. And so in the Cabernet Sauvignon, that guy, it actually comes from 3 different vineyards here in the Walla Walla Valley. It comes from a vineyard called XL Vineyard, which is right next to Seven Hills Vineyard. And we also have fruit in there from Seven Hills and Pepper Bridge. It's 91% Cabernet Sauvignon, 6% Merlot, and 3% Petit Verdot. It's 100% French oak. And there's about 35-36% new oak on this. So the Helix wines tend to be a little more, oftentimes can be a little more fruit forward and approachable, where Walla Walla has a little more minerality to it, and herbaceousness in a good way, can be a little more complexity anyway, oftentimes, to the Walla Walla fruit, but they're both real fun wines. This is a 2018 Reininger Cabernet Sauvignon. So yeah, look forward and enjoy it with the rest of the experience here.
Thank you, Chuck.
So thank you.
Yeah. Did we want to squeeze in one more question? Do we have a?
We have a bunch more questions, but yes, there's a question for how does stress affect epigenetics, as well as the gene off-on modulation?
Okay, yeah, stress definitely has a role in epigenetic. There's a lot of information about it being true, that stress, so epigenetics, for those of you who aren't geneticists, is changes to the genetic composition that are beyond the DNA. They're like after the DNA. So you're born with your DNA component, but epigenetics is something that gets laid on top of it that can change how those genes behave. And that is often caused by environmental influences. And stress definitely is one of those environmental influences that can change gene activity, not gene sequence, but gene activity in a really important way. And there's a lot of really great data on how stress does impact epigenetics. The mechanisms aren't very well understood. And that's actually a really interesting part of the puzzle that I'm very interested in, because my background is in gene expression and gene regulation. And that's where epigenetics really comes to bear. So yes, it has a very big impact. There's huge amounts of information on this. Nobody really knows exactly how and exactly why it happens, how it's connected to stress. It's just not that. There are pieces of that puzzle that are missing.
Interesting. So I just got a special notice here that Lisa has agreed to stay on with us for an extra 10 minutes because we have so many great questions that are still pending here. But I don't want to, I'd be remiss if I didn't give an opportunity to thank our sponsor tonight. And a big shout out to USI and Gary Baldridge and Susie Murphy from USI for sponsorship of our Science and Wine Club event.
Thanks, Cindy. It's Gary Baldridge here, along with Susie Murphy. Murphy, give a little wave. We have been a part of PNRI and been a sponsor for years through our traditional event. This is a little bit of an alternative, but traditionally an evening of wine, and now the Science and Wine Club. And I was just thinking, I saw a bunch of Dalmatians and kids, and I thought, if my college experience was this enjoyable, I might still be in college, because I'm first trying to pronounce all these words, and then learning and understanding will come secondarily. But great work. What a fun way to learn about the research and our favorite Northwest wines. So thanks, Chuck. And just a toast to the work that Lisa's doing, because I see this as pandemic has been the point of focus. But now the silver lining is the pandemic, the cause and effect of stress.
Yeah.
And, tough times lead to good opportunities and awareness and opportunity, which I think is terrific. I've learned a lot today and it's been great. So I'd just like to raise a toast to Lisa. I'm the Toastmaster because of the wine, the work that she's doing more broadly. What I've mentioned, what we've enjoyed is the work of PNRI and how they've changed lives through their fight against disease. So here's to the organization and all the people that make it happen.
Cheers. Thank you. Thank you for your long-standing support, Gary and Susie and USI. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Great. And I just want to put a data point in here. Mark down July 21st will be our third Science and Wine Club event. So we hope you will join us again for another one of PNRI's amazing scientists and another one of our great winery partners. So you'll get follow-up emails on that, but just wanted to let you know that our next one is on the calendar already. We're already planning for that one, so it's going to be great. And thank you, Lisa, for offering to answer some more questions, because I know we've got a pretty engaged group here and a lot of interesting ideas and thoughts still coming on. So Becky, what's our next question?
So another comment that I'm just going to say is that Rebecca mentioned that the wine process is exactly like humans. And I think that that's when Chuck was talking about the stress at the moments and our growth or non-growth based on it. And Andrew said that's less mobile. Rebecca asked, so women who breastfeed, I think this is to you, Lisa, may pass it on besides gestationally?
Breastfeeding, no. No. It's really the thing that gets passed on is the insulin dysregulation in gestational diabetes, because that's in your bloodstream. That's in your whole bloodstream. While your baby is developing, the mother and the baby share a body. Whatever's in her blood is in the baby's blood. That's the problem. So it's during development, it's during in utero development where the mother and the baby are sharing a body and sharing more. They're not really sharing a bloodstream, but they have a lot of communication between their bloodstreams, and molecules like insulin and glucose definitely go across the placenta and influence the way the baby's brain develops and body develops. So that's the issue. It's breastfeeding is not an issue at all because the child's already born. It's just going into its stomach. It's not sharing, it's not something like, you're not sharing a bloodstream with the baby at that point. You can pass things on through breastfeeding if you're like, for example, if you're exposed to toxins or something, and you can, or certain medicines, you can pass them on to your baby, but that's a really different situation. It's not the same as gestational diabetes when the child that's happening with the child.
Can I clarify why I asked the question?
Yes.
It was mostly because of the person who said, and the stressors in cows, because it affects their milk production.
Yeah.
And so it actually was really more about like Does it affect women and their ability
To produce
to
milk.
be able to breastfeed their child? I've never had a child myself, but I do know many friends that either did or did not.
Yes, it can affect production of milk for sure, and the quality of the milk.
Yeah, and so I was kind of curious about that because you also think about the fact that so many women are in the work environment today.
Yes.
Even more so than ever in the past. And so you can imagine how it may end up show up in the children that are coming forward today.
Absolutely.
You know, and I have, as a person who's adopted, I am sure I had a teenage mother who was stressed, but I never been, had breast milk, but I'm also a very healthy person. I had two parents that were teenagers and whatever. But I just, it's so interesting. I also asked a bunch of the questions, I think privately to you also, about the ability, because we have counseling and PTSD, coaching and a bunch of other things, like, can you actually counteract your genetic aspect?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
As well.
Absolutely. It's very important to just recognize, I've had conversations with people about this before. I think our medical system is not trained well enough to integrate psychology into their treatments. And, because there's so many things that if they were recognized early could be treated and change people's lives. Some of those things manifest, you go to a diabetes doctor because you have diabetes, they're thinking about your blood sugar. They're not thinking about your brain. Mm-hmm. Some of them are. It's becoming, it's dawning on people, but there needs to be more consideration of the whole system. And I think unfortunately our system is set up a little bit so that there's this canalization, and you go to a diabetes doctor, or you go to a cardiovascular doctor, or you go to a mental health professional. You don't go to somebody who's thinking about the whole person. And there's no doubt about it that early interventions on children who are stressed could really make a big difference.
So frankly, what it would be is like if they took what they do with seniors, where some of them are starting to get coordinated care, and you actually did that at a younger age, you get a benefit.
Critical. Absolutely critical. Yeah. Especially to people who are at risk. And there are people who are at obvious risk, but.
Hey, Becky, I need to run here. So I have other people waiting. So thank you guys for letting me share our experiences with you. And we've been, I think, with PNDR auction. I'm not sure if it was from the very beginning or maybe it was second one, but anyway.
It's been over 15 years.
Yeah.
It's been a long time. So it's been a fun relationship. So thank you very much for inviting me.
Nice wines.
Thank you. Yeah.
Take care, everybody.
Very nice wines.
Oh, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
I know. Did we have another question out there for Lisa?
We do. We had a couple Chuck questions, which I'm just going to skip over. And okay. Rebecca, thank you for clarifying your question too. We have another question. Actually, that's not a question. Andrew, I had something in there that I'm going to let you look at later, Lisa.
Okay.
For Lisa, from Stefan, is there any training with pre-med and med school docs about this topic that you know of?
I think in some places, this is becoming more and more important. Excuse me, if you can hear crunching in the background, that's my puppy knocking things over. It wasn't very serious. So more and more, it's this kind of thinking is coming into the medical community, but it's still not prevalent. It's still not everywhere. It's still not, I think it's dawning on medical professionals that you can't just have this canalized treatment. I'm a dermatologist, or I'm a cardiovascular person, or and I don't know anything else about the rest of the body. But I think it's not there quite yet, but there are some places where this kind of integrative treatment is happening. And I think it's going to happen more and more in the future. And I just think it's extremely important for that to happen.
It's killing me not to elaborate. I'm trying so hard to stay on.
Elaborate, Stefan. Feel free.
Please.
We're in OT.
Please.
We're in OT in the glass. What made me think of it, Lisa, was purely, I remember after the 2008 crash, I read an article saying that, they're going to start teaching morals classes in MBAs. And they're going to say, hey, you know what? In freshman or first year of MBA school, don't steal from your customers. What? And the thought that needed to be taught at Wharton terrified me, but
Yes.
also it was like, yeah, by the way, you need to also not be a demon. And with this, because we had this discussion with the board when we met with you last time about how I feel that there's such an obvious emotional component between patient and doctor.
Yes.
And I'm going to throw Hagopian under the bus again, just because it's fun to do, because I mentioned him, but having that pushback with him over the last several years, like just say good job one time, you can do it. I don't care if my HA1C is at 10 or at 6. 10's better than 11, 6 is better than 7. Like, just say that out loud, and it means the world. That lab coat fear is so real.
It is.
If it affects my blood pressure, everyone agrees that the white coat makes your blood pressure go up across the board. Then you giving the doctor saying good job can lower stress levels, which lowers your glucagon, which just that one relationship. And that's kind of why I wanted to ask about bringing that up earlier. I feel like if doctors realized the power they had on you physically because of the emotional component, and that's why I feel like that needs to be pushed, even if there's not a 1-to-1 ratio.
Absolutely.
And so your research is so critical to that note having veracity, because I don't think doctors will really listen unless they can see a 1-to-1 ratio on a paper. Oh, my note made a jump in cortisol, which made a jump in insulin, which made a jump in their lower metformin. That's why I asked that question. So again, more than anything, thank you.
I can tell you, because we're, David and I are trying to dig in and identify patient groups and physicians to interact with. There are definitely some physicians out there thinking about this, and they understand it totally. It's pockets, and it's mostly an academic research area, research pockets. But they're out there, and it's a dawning realization, for sure. I mean, certainly I know the diabetes doctors we've talked to. For example, David and I are trying to set up a collaboration with a clinic in West Virginia where the woman is a diabetes doctor, but she realized she needed to recruit a psychologist into her clinic because the people were coming in and they were so stressed out. And she could tell that was contributing to their disease. And she just, on her own, saw to it that they recruited a psychologist. And I don't know of very many clinics like that, but there need to be more, right? And these people are there. They're just starting to realize how important this is. I don't know how many there are and how many there aren't, but these are the few doctors we have found that are dealing with clinics that have this integrated care, and understand exactly what the stress is and how that's feeding back to their patient's disease.
We've got a couple minutes left, and Lisa, I just was thinking, Becky, there's no other pending questions, really, is there?
No. A very interesting comment, though, that stress is quantified in the NFL to guide elite training, and that technology is also coming to medicine, which is very interesting. A new tool.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought maybe, Lisa, just to kind of round this out for all of us that are still here, and thank you everybody for still being here. Where do you hope your research goes? What do you see the impact of this? Because, I think all of us here find it fascinating and so important. And so what do you think that the impact could be?
Well, so there are two areas of impact, and I think they're both equally important. One is more academic and one is more practical, but they end up being practical. The academic ends up being practical in the end. This connection with the clinics. I'm not a human geneticist. I don't really know how to do any of that kind of thing. I've never worked with patient groups before. I think it's really exciting to do it, but it's kind of new to me. Getting to the point where we could identify real humans and then talk to the doctors about interventions and ways to monitor whether or not the interventions are acting is really interesting. So that's just a matter of getting biomarkers where you can test people. We've talked to some of these clinics, in fact, about taking blood and doing epigenetic studies to use the epigenetics to try to, as a monitor of whether or not, before the actual blood sugar comes down, use the epigenetics to understand whether or not the treatment is having some effect. So yeah, I really like the idea of interacting with them and identifying key markers that they can use for their patients so that they can monitor whether or not interventions and treatments are actually doing anything.
Mhm.
But my interest, really, I'm a basic scientist. My own lab's interest is figuring out how all this works. What is it? Why do those genes do what they do? What are the biochemical and genetic mechanisms that are driving these connections? And can we understand how all this works? Because if you do that, then you start identifying new points of intervention that somebody else can take to the clinics. And that's what I'm really interested in. It's just drilling down, and that's why the mouse is so great, because you can manipulate their genomes, you can treat them with things, you can change their diets in a very controlled way. They have really controlled genetics, and you can actually try to nail down how things are working. What are the steps in the process? What steps can we intervene in, and what can't we intervene in? That's my interest personally, but I really like this idea of being able to reach out to the doctors as well and the patients as well.
Well, fantastic. Well, we continue to support your amazing research, and would love to see that come to fruition. Absolutely. So Becky, I think we get to roll it up now. Again, thanks to Gary and Susie USI for sponsoring our event. Lisa, so incredible always talking with you and hearing about your research. Shout out to Chuck, who had to go take his next meeting, and to everybody who's still on the call with us. July 21st, mark your calendar. We'll do it again. And thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. It's been great seeing you here.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This was awesome.